You're not the host. Shut up.
Wow. Someone actually felt very strongly about that.
And welcome to the Down and From podcast. I'm your host, the Mouth of the South Bryland, and we are here gathered tonight with a bunch of my friends to review the surprise post-Super Bowl movie, The Cloverfield Paradox. But before we get into that, let's do some introductions. So to my left, looking as fashionable as always, the host of the Fear Boners himself, Mr. Andrew Abbott. How are you doing this evening?
Doing very well, very well. Very warm right now. My entire body is covered with spandex or velour or velvet, and I'm just overheating because it's up at 80 degrees, so I'm going to be melting soon.
All right, cool. That's good to get away from that snow out there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What you been drinking tonight?
Drinking some leftover Narragansetts from when we watched the Royal Rumble. We still have like a ton of those still hanging around. Am I going into what I've been watching?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've been watching a little bit of Altered Carbon. I haven't finished it yet. Really good high sci-fi. Devilman Crybaby was some of the anime I've been watching, but most recently the movie that I watched that I really loved was Creep 2. It's got the dude from The League reprising his role as Creep from the first Creep movie. It's a horror movie where he kind of decides that he wants to make a documentary of the fact that he's a serial killer. And it's really awkward and uncomfortable, and there's lots of penises in it, so it's a great movie, and I highly recommend it.
Yep. And to Abbott's immediate left, this guy needs no introduction. He is, as the Lord intended, Mr. Mocha Mike. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well. How are you guys doing tonight?
Good.
I feel like I haven't seen any of you in quite a while. I think this is this our first review since the new year?
First full one.
Second.
No, it's the first one. Yeah, it's the first one I've been back on. That's right. Well, I'm glad to be back.
There.
I did hear that. It scared the flaccid out of me.
Some immediate throwbacks.
As for what I've been up to in terms of content that I've been watching, I've been binging on a lot of anime lately. Not unlike Mr. Andrew Abbott, I recently went through Devilman Crybaby, which was absolutely nuts. It's an interesting show. I liked it a lot. The animation is really, it kind of feels rough and simplistic, but it's super smooth when it kicks into high gear. And once you get through a few episodes, it kind of feels right. And it's a show that really grew on me as it went along, though it is not for the faint of heart. It's pretty bloody and gory and over-sexualized in the sort of way that only the Japanese could do in a cartoon. So check it out on Netflix if you're interested in that. And as for what I'm drinking, I'm not drinking too much tonight. I'm trying to take it easy. So I'm sitting here with a bottle of Havana Club Añejo Especial that my cousin brought me from her trip to Cuba. And I'm about to take a shot to kick this off. So salud, guys.
Taking it easy.
Mazel tov.
I love how he goes. Yeah, I'm not going to be drinking too much, but I'm going to have a shot at the beginning of the podcast.
And then just nearly dies taking it.
When you smash a 12-pack to yourself during Super Bowl weekend, one shot is kind of taking it easy. But yeah.
Only a 12-pack?
Exactly.
Oh, fuck off.
Well, thank you for joining us this evening, Mocha.
My pleasure.
We are excited to hear what you have to say. And to his left, the man with the greatest lips on the planet, probably. The one and only the Shredder, Mike Blewett. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, fantastic, my friend. Although, I don't know, Warren might give me a good run for the money on my lips.
Mike. Yeah, it's pretty neck and neck.
They're both quite succulent. I'm doing pretty good. Honestly, I've been doing a lot of catch up, not to tease the next episode before the next real episode, but I've been trying to get my Marvel TV game back in order, which is kind of hard because there's a lot of it that came out this fall. As far as what I'm drinking, it's mostly going to be leftover beer from the previous weekends. Obviously, I think there was a big party that happened on Sunday. I don't remember any of it, so I don't think Sunday happened. So if we could just replay the Super Bowl, because I know that's coming up. I know the Patriots are in it. I'm pretty excited about it, so I'm really happy to see them there.
Interesting that you want to relive that night.
No, I don't think it happened. So let's just—it's a redo, right? Because
we're recording this before Sunday, right?
No, they lost. So get over it.
They
bro.
just a redo.
Get over it, bro.
Yeah, you remember when Gronk shit his pants? That was great.
I was gonna say only 3 more losses in a row, and then we can equal the Bills. Rousing success from the early '90s. This is gonna get contentious real fast. And thanks for joining us for the Down From podcast.
20 years ago.
Are you drinking anything tonight?
I think I'm getting kicked out. Yeah, so it's all leftover beer. I got this nice coffee black lager from Sam Adams, which I was holding off to do after for one of these things. But after that, it's all gonna be Gansets and Bud Lights. Good stuff.
Yep. All right. Drown your sorrow as well, my friend.
Oh, I'll recover eventually.
And to his left, it's none other than the one and only, sounding very far away, often imitated, but only one original. The man, the founder of the Down Front podcast himself, Mr. Warren Jackson. How you doing this evening?
And welcome to the Down... Oh, wait, different one. I am doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I am way up here in the great state of Alaska and looking down in the lower 48, as they call it up here, which I think is hilarious. But I'm having a great time.
It's interesting. This is a very regionally diverse episode of the podcast. We've got people in Massachusetts, people in New York, people in California, people in allegedly Alaska. I'm pretty sure he's in Russia, and he's doing a little espionage action.
He's Trump's guy.
Oh, yikes.
Oh, wow.
Warren, did you get to swim with the salmon while you're out there?
I did. I did that yesterday.
Did you
it was
catch
weird.
one with your mouth?
I did.
Gotta look out because they always go for your butt.
Yeah. Anyways, I am currently sipping on, I'm trying to take it easy, not have anything crazy. I just have some Jameson. So I'm going to go take a shot of that.
But wait a minute, Warren.
Yeah.
There's something special about this Jameson now.
Is it?
What is this Jameson chilled with?
Oh, this Jameson is...
This is an Alaskan JMO.
The purest of the purest white snow of Alaska. in Alaska.
Oh, for a second there, I was going to go grab my tiki torches.
Yeah, right.
Pure whites.
White snow is right snow.
Oh, we're not going to go there.
Oh.
Yikes. This is actually chilled with some Alaskan snow because I couldn't find any ice anywhere else. And it works. So I'm going to be doing that, kind of hanging out. So cheers to everybody. And
Cheers to your dogs.
Was that your butt?
There's going to be a lot of dogs. Hopefully that it doesn't interrupt too much. But I've been watching Goodbye, Christopher Robin on the plane, which I thought was an awesome movie. And definitely go check it out because Donald Gleason and Margot Robbie's in it. So who wouldn't love those casts? And his name is Alex. I'll look up his last name, but he is probably my favorite character now, especially he's in the Netflix series Into the Fucking World, which is also phenomenal. And I also kind of binged that within the last week. So lots of good TV to start off. Lots of good stuff coming out for right now to start off 2018. So definitely go check it out. And great to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us tonight. And what I've been drinking is I decided I've had a long day. I want to stay awake. So I got a venti iced Americano from my local Starbucks. Trying to make Americanos great again. So
We should have just taken 2018 off.
Yeah.
Our first big podcast, we're rocking it right now.
Yeah, we're getting very subversive now. But recently what I've been watching, I decided to watch the first 2 episodes of Altered Carbon and Electric Dreams, just because it's really cool. It's like, hey, new sci-fi stuff things that are along the kind of cyberpunk genre, or just trying to reinvigorate hard sci-fi, because we had a lot of success in that with shows like The Expanse and movies like Blade Runner 2049. And I found both of them to be just kind of like lukewarm and meh, because I feel like they both suffer from the same thing that I think Black Mirror suffers from, is that they're trying too hard to get their points across. And I think, they're just two shows that have a lot of potential. They got good things going for them. They got really solid budgets, but it's not anything new or refreshing. It feels very boring and drawn out for no purpose at all, which is kind of upsetting.
I believe it was a hot take, because you're saying Black Mirror tries too hard. Did you just glaze over that, or we're not going to unpack that at all?
That's one reason that I can't get into Black Mirror that much, is because I feel like it's just hitting the nail on the head too hard.
Well, Brylan, this is an important distinction. Are you saying that the series tries too hard, or season 4 of Black Mirror has tried too hard?
Well, I watched just the first season, and I think that season tried.
Well, it gets better as you go along, definitely.
It gets better.
Electric
I'm a man with only limited amount of time, so if I'm very picky about my choices after some very brief stints, I don't know. Maybe I'll try a couple more episodes and see if they finally win me over, but they're not off to good starts.
That's your right as an American, Bryland. The right to choose.
Last thing I did check out was, Mike, I hate to break it to you, but the Super Bowl did happen. There were some commercials during the Super Bowl. I would say, in particular, ones that really stood out were the David Harbour Tide ads. And those were just hilarious to watch. I think those are some of the best Super Bowl commercials made in quite a while. So it's a lot of fun and entertaining.
I can't stop eating Tide Pods.
No one can.
No, it's another Tide ad is one of the most brilliant marketing ploys I've seen. Or marketing techniques I've seen in a while. It really got me. It was good.
Well, as soon as they pointed out that everyone's got clean clothes, like the entire rest of the show, I was just like, oh, they have clean clothes. This must be a Tide ad, and kind of immediately forgot about what we were actually what the actual ad was about.
It just makes every commercial a Tide ad.
Yeah.
Yeah, they hijacked every other commercial in the Super Bowl. It was brilliant.
Speaking of interesting things that have been that were advertised during the Super Bowl, one of those things in particular was this movie we're going to review tonight, the Cloverfield Paradox? Yes, Cloverfield Paradox. And so you just saw this random commercial come on from Netflix, and then you realize it's a new Cloverfield movie, and you're like, oh shit, Netflix has this. And then they play it again, it says, will be available after the Super Bowl. And you're like, wow, they just announced this movie for the first time and dropped it the same night, which is really hasn't been done at all.
Yeah, I want to bring you guys on a little emotional roller coaster. For me, that was an extremely exciting moment. Now, when that happened, I was definitely not in a standard state of mind. We won't talk about what things were influencing me at the moment, but there were many. But regardless, it opened up with a scene from the original Cloverfield, and then transitioned into the trailer for the new one. And the very thought of what I expected to be a direct sequel, given that setup, filled me with crazy excitement. I love the original Cloverfield movie. To this day, I still love it. And I am a fan of 10 Cloverfield Lane as well. So the amount of hype that I felt coursing through my body was unparalleled at that moment.
Yeah, I was definitely excited when they showed that too, because even though I wasn't a big fan of the first Cloverfield movie, I really enjoyed 10 Cloverfield Lane. I thought that was awesome. So I was like, oh, cool. I really definitely want to see something new in this universe. But what are other people's thoughts on how they approach this marketing?
I thought it was pretty awesome. I'm really glad they did it, because arguably this is one of the only event that I think everybody's going to be watching. My only sort of concern is the one thing that people may not want to watch is after the Super Bowl. because at this Super Bowl, because at that time, I believe, This Is Us premiered, as well as a lot of people going to be getting drunk, and it's already pretty late. There's like not many things in your favor to release this movie the day of the Super Bowl. Now, 7 a.m. the next day, 8 a.m., 9 p.m. the next day, or something like that, I think that would have been pretty effective. But for them to release it on the night of the Super Bowl, by the time that the Super Bowl ended, I think it was like 10 o'clock or something like that, 9:30, 10 o'clock. I just think it'd be kind of tough for people to actually want to flock to it. Now, I think it's pretty smart, but I don't know. I thought it was kind of interesting.
Well, here's something to keep in mind, though, with that, Warren, is that way more people than you might realize are making the demographic of individuals who are at home watching the Super Bowl. And that time slot directly after the Super Bowl has long been a coveted time slot for TV shows. One quick random example off the top of my head is how Family Guy premiered, or Fox premiered the pilot for Family Guy after the Super Bowl. So it's actually a really coveted spot in terms of TV broadcasting.
And I think that going up against This Is Us was a smart thing. I think if it was, I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was Criminal Minds was after the Super Bowl. And that was a kind of a big deal. I was into those types of shows at that time. So I was oh, maybe I'll, not be wasted and, watching the Patriots win the Super Bowl. And so I probably wouldn't have watched Cloverfield because I would have been watching Criminal Minds. But I think This Is Us is marketed at such a different demographic than who would have been watching Cloverfield that it truthfully was smart to put it after there, because you're probably getting a different set of people that are still looking to be entertained. I'll give you, for example, I know it was late, but my buddy he works a 9-to-5 job and takes that Monday off every single time. Every single year he takes that Monday off. And so he's in a state where he can wake up late the next day and could stay up late the night before. And it was a perfect example of someone who would have watched that movie. I think he's one of the biggest Patriot fans I know, and I think he was getting ready to jump out of his second-story window, so I don't think he watched it, but he would have been a perfect demographic of someone to watch that film.
I thought it was I think it definitely worked in their favor, because I was actually doing what everybody does, look at social media while you're watching the Super Bowl, just multi-screening everything nowadays. And a lot of people it was showing that a lot of people were tuning in, that Netflix's viewership spiked during the second half of the Super Bowl because of this. So
that and the Infinity War trailer. The Infinity War trailer was close. Yeah. Dude, someone pointed this out, that they don't even need to put the name of the movie in the trailer. Everyone just knows. They're yep, you just put the frickin' A, and it's yeah, that's Avengers.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into our review of the Cloverfield Paradox. I don't know why it's so hard to say. But
pair of socks.
The Cloverfield Paradox. But we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. Welcome back. We are here to review the Cloverfield Paradox. So we're going to start off with our wins tonight. So, Mr. Mike Blue, what are some things that won you over with this movie?
So yeah, Brian, I think the two things. I think the advertisement, the campaign that they ran for this was absolutely what drove me in, and I thought that was awesome. Netflix is clearly trying to get on a path of how ridiculous can we make our marketing with like The Punisher, they didn't release a single trailer, and I think the only reason they released a trailer was because the date got pushed back because of the Las Vegas shooting.
Yeah.
Like, the word was that they wanted to release it that weekend, and they were doing all these things in the they did have previous trailers, but they just blanked out, like, the release date, and they were planning on just kind of dropping it one day. And I thought they were supposed to do the same thing with this. And so that's instantly just something to make me watch this movie and be interested in it. I always like when businesses innovate, and this seems like a possible way of innovating on the field of advertising and marketing. The other thing is that definitely the cast drew me in. I super warned this, where I didn't see either of the first two, and I didn't know anyone, and I barely saw, because I was at a big Super Bowl party, so I barely saw the commercial for Paradox. And so this movie starts off with Gugu Mbatha-Raw and David O standing on the bridge there, going back and forth, and they're just joined by another like star-studded cast with Daniel Bruhl. Elizabeth Debicki comes in about halfway through, Chris O'Dowd, who is everyone's favorite near-drunk Irishman, and returning from Rush Hour 2, Zhang Zi. She is absolutely my favorite Rush Hour 2 villain, and I don't watch enough Chinese films to know her from anywhere else. Apparently she's one of the 4
Crouching
Dawn...
Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yeah, well, yeah, besides that one, which is like 20 years ago. Apparently she's one of the 4 most bankable actresses in China, but like I can only name her in like 2 movies. Whatever, and one of those is Rush Hour, so that immediately overqualifies her. And I think that interplay between all of them, because this movie was definitely a smaller movie. Like, you didn't have... It really focused on the personal interactions between them, and I think that you combined a lot of people with drastically different artistic acting styles. You know, you didn't really have to make them stretch to become roles, because they're basically the characters we've seen them in a lot, and then force those different characters to interact with each other. Like, we didn't have, what's his face, Chris O'Dowd in like a goofy comedy role. Like, his comedy role had to bounce off the very German, very serious Daniel Bruhl, and like, I thought those interactions really gave a nice credence to this movie. It felt like an international effort rather than, a bunch of like Americans playing people from other places. So yeah, those were honestly my biggest wins, marketing and then cast.
Awesome. Cool. Warren, what you got?
I don't know if I have a lot of wins for this movie. I was glad that they attempted to make like a really cool, like interesting sort of sci-fi flick. And I think anything with space, right? I think there's a bunch of different tropes, and there's a lot of things that you can necessarily do of why they don't have fire in space, why there's not guns in space, and things like that. I think they kind of played up to that one pretty well. And also kind of leading us to this kind of mysterious sort of hopping on this journey together, like we all kind of figure things out. So I thought that was kind of pretty cool. And I was kind of interested in kind of engaging in with that element, as well as a simultaneous sort of storytelling, because there's always something interesting to figure out. Kind of like Westworld, I think we talked about before, of they're telling multiple stories, but we don't know from what perspective or what time frame and things like that. Like, we try to figure out all that information a little bit later. So I thought that was interesting that they did those things. Yeah, that's kind of all I got for this movie. I'm excited to talk about criticism and hot takes with this movie.
Awesome. Mocha, what are some of your wins on this movie?
Yeah, so I think I'm unique in this situation, or at least in this group here, where I have a lot of things in this movie that I actually do like. For one, the visuals in it were pretty solid. This was a movie that wasn't made on a particularly large budget. It was originally supposed to be a $5 million movie, which is crazy low, and then it wound up ending at around $50 million, I think. But considering that budget, they were able to make some really believable sets, whether it was the different rooms of the research vessel, or just the CGI effects of seeing the Earth outside the window, or just what things look like in general. I thought it looked really good for a relatively low budget movie that surprised us on Netflix. I would have expected less if you had told me about this ahead of time. And there was one scene that comes to mind that really struck me, which was right when the team turns on the Shepherd device for the first time, and it rips that hole in space-time. There's a shift in gravity where suddenly everybody flies up and it hits the ceiling, and then everyone flies back down. And that alone is a pretty standard thing that we see in movies with practical effects. But what I thought was cool was that the ground that the surface of this ship was littered at the moment with a whole bunch of shards of broken glass. And when that gravity switched, every single piece of glass went up with the bodies and then came back down too. And it looked like those were practical effects. If it wasn't, that makes a lot more sense. But if they were practical effects, that's a really cool technique. And it really, really drove the impact of that scene home. Especially early in the movie, where I still thought it was going to be a really good, scary movie. It helped really add to the intensity of that sudden shift in gravity.
Mocha, I gotta say, I do think that the CGI was better than Bright, the last major Netflix film that we did. And the set design was good. I just thought it didn't really bring anything new to the table. Like, I don't know, it seemed like kind of dull. Like, they were good. They didn't look fake, like at some points of Bright. Just like, they didn't really stretch anything. Like, it wasn't a spaceship I haven't already set foot in. You know?
I agree. I think I can agree with that. A lot of the issues with this movie is that it kind of takes a lot of elements from different stories we've already seen and experienced, and just kind of mashes them together and puts Cloverfield on it. But that being said, it was also very different than what we've seen from Cloverfield. Like, the last time we saw anything that was really groundbreaking in the Cloverfield movie was the first one, and that was the found footage style of recording. With this movie, at the very least, it gave us a setting that was familiar. You know, you had the claustrophobia of 10 Cloverfield Lane, where you're stuck in a tight space away from the rest of the world. But the technology that was in place, the more sci-fi look of it, rather than it just being like a drab concrete walls, I felt like at least was different for the franchise. But yeah, I agree with you. There isn't too much originality in this movie.
I think it'd be really cool if they would have also kind of put, 10 Cloverfield Lane and at the same time do the Cloverfield Paradox, and honestly release them at the same time. I think that would have been a pretty sort of just a cool way to say that, just different ways of storytelling, as well as, it would have made it a little bit easier to necessarily kind of watch, I guess, these two movies sort of back to back, because maybe, I don't necessarily know, and I think we're going to probably get into this a little bit later on, but like timeline, right? I guess we don't know what year 10 Cloverfield Lane probably came, but it was definitely before this, right? But after they actually do in this movie, and spoiler alert for this movie, if they do the sort of time jump, right, do they still stay in the same year in time in the alternate universe, or they go back in time, or do they
the alternate universe doesn't really matter. That's its own thing. The thing that I wish they really left open was, and this is completely separate to your question, was whether they jump back to the initial universe and whether that was the actual universe, or that if that wasn't, whether that was a third one. And I think they had a nice opportunity to hint at it, but they didn't really. They were like, oh yeah, it's done. The story's done. They're in the normal one. They're going home. What I will say is I think that all these movies take place at the same time, because you have that huge impact in London, and that seems like it's parallel to the impact that's felt in New York, right? In the first movie.
I think it was supposed to be stylistically parallel, but I don't think it happens at the same time, because this film takes place in the year 2028, and the original movie took place in the year 2008. We know that from the original, from the found footage, like camera number or whatever. And I believe they said it early on in this movie. If not, I know it's like part of their actual promotion material that is started in 2028. And I believe the implication is that the events of this movie create that quote unquote Cloverfield paradox that causes other time like tears in time and space throughout time. And so the 2008 event happens because in 2028, they fuck up the time stream.
Yeah, but that makes
at least I think that was the implication.
The entire thing is just like Donald Logue getting on the TV and explaining it as like some pop psychologist, like spatial theorist who's like, oh yeah, demons are coming. And then the newswoman's like, demons? And it just is dismissed as like a 2-minute scene. But he just he explains the entire plot of the entire Cloverfield series.
So we should actually save this section for later on, because we can go back and forth about what it means in terms of like the branching off of different timelines and universes. But we should definitely come back to this, because I think it's one of the more interesting things that comes out of the end of this movie.
Well,
but in terms of just
go ahead.
In terms of just other positives that I liked about this movie, I thought that regardless of the failings from a writing standpoint and a storytelling standpoint, there were some really good performances all around. And like you mentioned earlier, the cast was really good. Daniel Bruhl, Gugu Mbatha-Raw, Chris O'Dowd, David Oyelowo, all these actors brought in some really solid performances. And I don't think there were really any that were particularly bad. I really, really dug Gugu Mbatha-Raw and her character, her feelings, her emotions towards freaking out and finding out that in this new universe that she's in, the children that she lost in a hellish blaze are still alive. And the way that sort of drives her to a brink of momentary insanity. I felt like a lot of her emotion felt really real. The captain, David Oyelowo, I can't remember his actual character's name, but
Neil.
There's this moment where he's
Keel.
Captain Keel. There's this moment where once he realizes that things are kind of fucked, he's sitting in his room by himself, sort of just like coming to terms with things as he prepares to compose himself and go out and talk to his crew. And we get this really cool moment where it's quiet. There's no dialogue. It's just a shot of him looking really shaken while he's sitting on his bed, and then sort of steeling himself and getting up and going out and addressing his crew. And that little bit of intense acting that was all just in his face told us everything we needed to know about his character and how he was dealing with the trauma of being in a situation that was completely out of his pay grade and having to save, the lives of his crew that he was with. So I think for whatever faults the rest of the movie had, it was brilliantly casted, and gave me some pleasing shots in terms of the visual effects.
Yeah, cool. Andrew, what were some of your wins that you had for this movie?
Yeah, I had a few abbreviated, punctuated, small, tiny parts of this movie that I enjoyed. And that included the Cousin It hand. We saw that in the trailer during the Super Bowl. We saw a hand crawling through the hall, and it's cool. You're like, is that a robot? Is that a zombie? Like, what kind of hand is that? And then the movie happens, and you're like, oh, it's just a hand. That's still really cool. That was really well executed. The whole sentient hand was cool, but they didn't really do anything with it. It was still cool to me. I thought it was neat, but I feel like there could have been more done there, but I still enjoyed it. The scene where the doctor husband on Earth 1 saves the child from the building, when he sees the silhouette of a monster wandering through the fog, was terrifying and was really cool, and teased that you were going to see more monster, but then you don't. But that scene was really cool, I thought. The space station design was really cool. I think that dealing with the themes and the plot of multiversal travel and things is still kind of over some people's heads. So there's going to be some people who hate this movie because they don't understand it. But because I read a lot of comics and I watch a lot of shows that deal with the multiversal idea, I thought this was really cool. That they sort of introduced that as a main plot point. And a lot of the things they could have done, there were things that I was really looking forward to them doing with some of the characters that didn't happen, but I look forward to seeing what they do with it going forward with the next movie and things like that. I loved the marketing campaign. I love that it was just shout out after the Super Bowl. That was awesome. Super pumped about it. Didn't enjoy the movie, but I enjoy to see where things are going. So I think onwards and upwards as a whole, I think this was a fun experiment.
Awesome. Yeah, I would add on to that one thing that I really liked, I'd second this with you, Mocha, was I thought the set design and the visual environment was really well done. I mean, it's definitely a step above anything else that Netflix has done so far. So it was good to see that there was some quality production to the visuals in this film. I also thought it was neat that the scary thing, because all the Cloverfield movies kind of have a horror premise to them. The scary thing in this movie was what what happens to physics when you rip the space-time continuum? And that's what the scary thing was. It wasn't like the actual monster or something supernatural. It was like, oh, you found a random person fused with the wall and shit. Worms got fused with someone's insides and killed him and made him go crazy. It was really nuts to see these things happen. I was glad that they kind of like approached it that way, that it was kind of like when you do have those special rifts. These are like theories that physicists have that where points in time meet, and if they fuse together, it can cause some crazy shit to happen. So I was happy to see that as well. But along
worm
with
theory.
worm
Theory is my favorite branch of physics.
Yeah. But one thing with these wins, we might have liked some of the things in this movie, but a lot of times we don't like parts of the movie. Mr. Blewett, what were some of your criticisms you had for this film?
What it could have been. I think that's like the biggest thing for me. Like, this movie had a lot in it that was like, okay, and then it just went, For me, like, it just didn't know what it wanted to do, and I get it. They're doing a good job of like doing the found footage thing, and then like the creepy bunker for the second one. Like, they're doing different films, and it sounds like the next film, which is I guess already in post production and is due out this fall, is going to be something completely different. You know, it's a fourth, like a truly fourth, you know, genre in one universe. I just think that, like, you had to pick one for this. Like, they're up in a spaceship, and they're dealing with an alternate dimension. Like, I thought they were going to go the alien route, because I thought they were going to introduce Cloverfield to the planet via the spaceship. You know, like, I thought, and it's a remake of Alien. It's a remake of, what was that movie with...
Life,
that everyone thought was a backdoor symbiote reference. Which would have been interesting, but and so you know, I guess that wouldn't have been the most original thing in the world, but it would have been a consistent function. One thing that I thought they really should have played on was has anyone seen the movie Event Horizon?
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
So good.
So good,
I like it.
Unbelievable. Abbott, have you seen that?
Oh yeah, I used to be terrified of it, and then when I started liking horror movies, I watched it again. I was like, this movie's dope.
Yeah. All right, cool. I was gonna say, if you hadn't seen that, we need to have a movie night right now. I'm on my way over. And so, like, there's more than just... You can do scary without having necessarily, like, a big old monster. And so having someone do the alien... I thought literally those worms were gonna come out of his chest like a chest burster. Like, I was so convinced. I was like,
or at
dude,
least his eye. Like,
Yeah.
you're fucking around with your
they-
eyes the entire time. Had
Yeah.
it burst out of his eye socket.
Yeah.
The way they set it up, like, you for sure, like, he was, like, his rib cage was cracking and moving, and like,
Yeah.
it looked was gonna, and it just didn't.
Anyways, that's a disjointed thought, but so they had Jensen show up in the wall, and so I think she brought with her a really cool concept that, like, she was from another crew, and it looks like they almost just teleported in where that ship was and kind of took its place, right? You know, and then she ended up in the wall because she was a meter over in that hallway, and then when it took its place, she's now all of a sudden in the wall. And that's the way, at least I took it.
It's
Yeah,
I
it's the
feel like
same
the movie
points in
was
space crossing one another into different dimensions, and so they're going to trade off some matter.
No, they didn't, because the Cloverfield
No.
ship was on planet Earth. Like,
yeah.
I don't...
No, but you don't know if the engine was the thing that caused it to actually get damaged and crash to Earth, though.
Well, but it was on the other side of the sun in their universe.
Yeah,
They were in a different location.
That one didn't make too sense. The way that I
But
took
they
it,
did show the ship crashed into
That was their
in the
purpose,
water on Earth.
Yeah, I don't
All
know.
right, we'll save it for afterwards.
Yeah, I don't exactly know. The way I kind of took it is that it took its place and that she ended up a meter over than where she should have been, and she ended up in the wall. And I thought it set up something really cool where her distrust to Schmidt's character, because Schmidt was, like, physically someone else, was awesome. It was like The Thing. you know, where like you didn't necessarily know who was evil because you didn't know what this universe was. I thought one of the best shots in this entire movie was when they're looking at is Volstagg or Volskin or whatever, and he's like doing his weird thing with the worms, and then Jensen is in the back, and she's like illuminated in that pasty, like her pasty complexion, and all you can see is her like dead eyes staring into it, and then the rest of the crew is in their crew uniforms like gathering around the body. And I thought that was a really cool shot that like she was separated but just looking in, and you could have played with that so hard. Like, was Jensen the only one that came over? Wouldn't have been cool if Schmidt like realistically did take the Schmidt that we knew from the first half of the movie's place. And you could have played this whole cat and mouse game trying to figure out who was from what universe, because they all look the same and they all share mostly the same background, just slight little differences to their personalities to create that unique character. And they would have been able to, you know, like the easy thing, if someone replaced Abbott right now, we could probably figure that out pretty quickly, because there's no way in hell a decoy would know all of their backstory, you know?
Or if just their brains swapped places.
Right, so you could have played this great cat and mouse game that they hinted at it, and then it just never went anywhere. Like, they're like, oh, I don't trust Smith. And then it's like, all right, well, I'm going to shoot him, but I'm going to shoot Monk, and I'm going to try and shoot Hamilton for the exact same reasons. There's no payoff to that storyline whatsoever. And
well, that's what I thought was going to happen with the Russian guy when his eyeball went all like weird. I thought what they were hinting at was that he did like a halvesies swap with his other half, and maybe he was like half and half. Like the other half was the Russian from the Earth 2 universe, and that's why it was like independent. And he started talking to himself. Like the eye thing I could see because like worms in your brain pushing your eye around, whatever. But then when he starts talking to himself like he's two other people for a second, I was like, oh, he's like two people in one body. That would have been so cool.
That would have been cool, except for the fact that he was the bad guy in their universe. You know, like he was the
no, the Russian guy.
Yeah, the Russian guy was the bad guy in that universe. He was. You don't think so? I took him as
Earth 1 when he makes the gun and stuff.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I got confused. You meant the German guy.
I thought the German was the one who was caught selling secrets to
the German guy was the bad guy in the second universe.
Right, but he was a good guy in the first.
Correct.
Right.
Well, we don't know if he was good. He just wasn't a traitor.
Right.
USA.
Yeah, I guess
I like the theory though. I like the theory that you had talked about, Adam, because that right there, and it took you maybe 3 minutes, right? That would have been way more interesting to see because it makes more sense from this movie, this story, this universe that you're establishing. Because if there's something that's going over, I think everybody, and I think it would have been pretty cool. I'm going to toss it over to Mocha, but everybody should have been affected at some point. Everybody should have happened, not just one or two people. Like the worms going into the Russian guy kind of came out of nowhere.
Worms, and then the engine thing. Like he got everything just stuffed in his butt.
Yeah,
he got like almost the worst of it.
So you're telling me you just don't feel that, or did it phase over at that time that they were doing the autopsy?
But also like
no, worms, because it was gone right away.
Yeah, and the worms were in the dimension they started from. You know, it's not like that didn't make any sense whatsoever.
Abbott, do you have any other criticisms you'd like to add on?
Oh, I have so many. I mean, I thought most of the character interactions in general were pretty messy. The turn of the woman who becomes the main character, the woman with the kids that are dead in her universe but are alive in her universe, you knew she was going to have that reaction, being like, oh my God, my babies are alive. But then when it drives her to suddenly be like, I'm abandoning ship, I'm abandoning my husband on Earth 1, and I'm going to live with this family with my doppelganger and raise my children and be with my children just like it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. I can understand like a temporary lapse in sanity, but like she makes that judgment so fast. To me, that was just kind of sloppy. But at the same time, like if that's how it was going to go, she just seems to be driven in a very selfish manner. And then I can't get behind a main character who's selfish like that. Like if she's not like you were saying, she's not the one who's like, oh, to kill 3 people to save 3 million people or 3 billion people, like
8 billion.
That's the person you want to get behind, not the person who's like, I'm going to just fuck these people. I'm going to fly off and be with my kids from another dimension. Like,
I'm going to get an escape pod and fly around the sun to show up on the doorstep of a very normal family and say, hey, I'm your mom from a different direction. Let's go.
Now you can have 2 moms.
So that didn't make any sense either. How the hell was...
mom and a dad.
Do they know in Cloverfield how freaking big space is? That you can't fly through the sun to get to the Earth? Like that...
You don't know. It's 10 years from now.
That would have been
I don't think you can argue. I don't think
it would have taken a few years.
Like any sort of so literally at this point, any sort of physics or science or math or any logic, let's be honest, at that point in the movie is completely thrown away. Because
say it's a paradox.
Nothing. Well, even in the paradox, people have regular logic, and they even have that to the point where I'm like, well, why? Now you're just putting things. I think somebody said this before. Now you're just shoving things together just for a sake to make this movie, and then
it suffers from the Prometheus logic. Like they're all supposed to be scientists and doctors and all in space, like astronauts and shit, and they're just like, oh yeah, let's just give it a go. Let's launch this thing and see what happens. Oh, press that button, whatever. Oh, alien life forms. Let's touch it with our masks off and no gloves on. Let's see what happens when we breathe this space fart. Oh shit!
Well, besides the space part, the majority of this movie, like I felt like at one point that says, "All right, we ready for this movie to end?" And here's the stinger. So there was about like maybe 35 minutes of stuff just blazes through, and I'm like, do we not? Wait, what's happening right now? I don't understand. You're just killing off a bunch of characters. Okay, the movie ends. All right, I get it. Like you're just wanting this movie to end. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, this movie is definitely confusing as hell.
But yeah, there's more like there's things that I thought it was leading into, like again going back to like the Russian guy being a split personality because he jumps into himself, or maybe they could have potentially swapped out the German guy when it's hinted at that he was the one who was spying for the Germans. Like that would have been cool, but that never happened. Or there was a moment where they sort of made you believe, like when the German guy approaches the blonde girl from Earth 2. And he's like, oh, just so you know, I'm not the guy from your universe. I'm not spying. And she kind of gives him that look, almost like she was working with him the whole time. Like I thought she was also going to be a spy, or she was going to be working for the Germans or something like that. And that never came around. And considering like this is the third movie in a franchise like Cloverfield that was so hyped up in the beginning and like such a big deal coming from a movie that had like crazy internet guerrilla marketing, there weren't really any callbacks until the very end when we see like Mega Clovey, which is like kind of dumb and wasn't really worth the wait. But
there was one.
That was so weird. I mean,
like,
the station's name is Cloverfield, isn't it?
No, the newscaster is the same in 10 Cloverfield Lane.
The newscaster?
Yep, the one interviewing Daniel Logue.
Wasn't the space station called Cloverfield?
It was. The space station was called Cloverfield, which is incredible to me because in this world, there already exists a concept of a quote-unquote Cloverfield paradox where you do something bad with too much energy and it destroys time and space. And then people built an international space station to do experiments about time and space and called the Cloverfield Station. That seems a bit
I think it would have been cool if like the end of Cloverfield, when you sit to the very end and you see like Beth and the guy, what's his face, they're under that bridge in Central Park, and the nuke or whatever goes off, the bomb goes off to destroy the monster, and everything flashes white, and then you think they die. It would have been so cool if suddenly they're on the spaceship. Like, that would have been cool. Like, just sitting there huddled, covered in blood from, like, 2008. They just survived a monster attack, but they're also on a space station that's about to explode. Like, that would have been a cool... You don't have to worry about those characters, but they time swapped. And then the pod winds up landing in 2008. But then I feel like there could have been so many cool things to bring things around, and it was just really sloppy and lazy and kind of shat out after the Super Bowl that I was just like, oh, well, that movie happened. I can't wait for the next one that takes place in World War II.
Well, don't forget, too, that this movie's been in production since 2013. So it wasn't just shot out at the Super Bowl. This has been in the works for 5 years.
Moko, what are some other beefs you have with this film?
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks for me because I'm such a big this franchise.
Just cut it.
And
it sucked. All right, Warren, take us home.
It sucked as well.
But there was one more thing I wanted to add real quick, if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, Mike. There were some characters, to me at least, that were wholly like unnecessary or useless. Like the doctor on Earth 1, her husband, while he was supposed to sort of convey, like be the person to check back with how's things going on Earth, like that's fine. But then he rescues that girl, and she might as well be a fucking mannequin. She was like useless.
Well,
he brought her into the
why?
bomb shelter that we thought was the bomb shelter from 10 Cloverfield Lane for a second. But then she's just like gibbering and crying and being like, "Oh, did you find my parents?" And they're like, "Oh, we found your parents." It's like, who gives a shit?
Yeah, who cared about that storyline at all? It didn't go anywhere. That movie.
Nobody. I was
should
hoping
have
she
been
was gonna get
its
eaten by a
own.
monster.
That should have been its own movie. You see this like heartfelt breakup at the beginning where the wife's got to go to space for some godforsaken reason, and then it follows that guy around as like he experiences it, and you tell an hour and a half to 2 hour long story about that dude, and then you could make it freaking The Last of Us, where he picks up you could even show the kids dying at the beginning of the movie, and then you could show him picking up the girl later, and then show how his like caring for his children has carried over to this new character. I don't even know her name. Like I there was nothing about her that stood out, and it didn't tie in with Hamilton. Like you could see if Hamilton came back and like started mothering the kids, but like she just didn't exist for anything. They should have just done that as its own movie. Like straight up, just
that's
cut
what
it
I
from
thought they
this
were going
one.
to do. Was she was going to get back and she was going to be there. Like they were like, "Oh, we found her parents, but they're dead," and then they just adopt the girl and they have a kid again. Like that,
Yeah,
whatever.
What is that going to be, like a 6 hour long movie to tell that?
Yeah. Warren, are there any other things that you think we should call out to criticize it for?
I mean,
Let it
I
out.
think we've already kind of. I would say I'm not here to kind of shit on movies. I never think that's actually fun, but just do the simple things right. So the doctor got shot in the gut and died immediately. Immediately. The German got shot in the gut and he was fine. He got shot in the arm. He was fine. She dug the 2 bullets out and dude's fine. What? Wait, hold on. Just pause for a second and like at least explain what's happening there. I mean, we talked about Chris O'Dowd's character. The acting was pretty atrocious in this movie. I definitely got to go against. I think somebody had said something from before, but if half this shit was happening in this movie, my goodness, like if your arm somehow gets put into a metal thing and then you look in your arm and your arm is missing, you'll have some sort of reaction to it. You'll say something. You'll have an immediate reaction what's actually happening. Not in the writings will say as the doctor examining him,
Oh, my arm's gone.
oh, he's in shock.
Well, no, the first thing he said was, "Oh, it's like he was born this way." That's when I thought Lady Gaga was going to kick in, and then that was going to be the end of the movie.
Yeah.
No, that's
For
Lady Goo Goo, who was in this movie. Also,
Yeah,
Warren, to be fair though, so medically speaking, if you get shot in the gut, if it hits some of these organs, like certain organs are just, you're done. And there wasn't a direct, like, he didn't die immediately. It was probably like, first of all, they're all Olympic level sprinters. That space station was huge, and they were sprint every 4 seconds. They're like, get down here. It's like, all right, cool. I'm just gonna dead run a mile.
Yeah. X deck.
But so,
Go ahead,
to that point, like, there was probably a couple minutes like between the doctor getting shot, and I forget where the first bullet that Brule's character took was. The second one was definitely right up here, and now he's definitely got a busted arm, but this is survivable. I'm sorry, this is a podcast, no one can see me, but I'm pointing to like basically my shoulder. Like that's not a death like sentence if you get that one. Whereas
No, yeah, I get what you're saying there, Blewett, but don't shoot him in the gut. Shoot him in the head. Shoot him in the head. Take the key. You're done. You don't need to have. Why are you shooting these people in the gut? You're literally trying to kill this crew. So what are you trying to do?
That's good.
She's also not a soldier.
Yeah, that's good gun etiquette. Well, even soldiers are told to you aim center mass because that's more likely to bring something down. And then
that's
in
true.
fact,
Which she did, and then just do a double tap and you're fine.
Right.
And
well, she's not a soldier, so again, like it makes sense for anyone with a cursory amount of like gun knowledge is gonna shoot center mass. And then the last thing there is I mean, there is precedent that if you got such a traumatic experience like losing an arm, you're gonna go in shock. And that people, even without nerve damage, have felt no pain because shock just shuts down the nervous system of the body. And they also made a point of saying that the nerves were severed. So he wouldn't have felt really any pain to begin with.
Oh, I'm not saying that, but if you're in shock, at least have some sort of reaction to what's happening. And his character literally sat there as somebody else explained to us as a viewer who saw everything, and these people who literally didn't see anything that happened, we get it. We understand. We physically saw what happened. Have a reaction character to that. Not explain to us exactly what we saw and what he should be actually feeling in that actual moment. It's kind of lazy.
You don't have reactions when you're in shock, though. Like, I got knocked pretty hard by a baseball when I was a kid, and I just remember sitting there just like with like a bloody rag on my face, and just sitting and just kind of like nodding back and forth. Like, if you're in shock, you don't react to things. You just kind of sit there.
I'll say this also, like I feel like your reaction is warranted, Warren, in that there should have been more dialogue like after the fact, where he's at least acknowledging the fact that, hey, I have to live the rest of my life now without an arm. This is weird. But they made a really clear point in the film of pointing out the fact that it wasn't like a normal wound. Like that part of his arm just disappeared and there was no blood. There was no sensation. He didn't physically feel any different. He just could visibly see that he had no arm. So like it was a weird one in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things in which, all right, so he ended up dying. I can't remember what his name in the movie, but he ended up dying because the metal that he put in to use a bond somehow contracted on him, although the metal was still being drawn towards the metal in that particular instance was going two different ways. And I think like they're setting up this alternate universe as things are just happening because of like what's happening, but the way that they made it seem like somebody was like after these people, like something was trying to kill these people, whether it's the water's bursting out and at the same time the water is leaking out inside that actual capsule, the capsule's loosening up, it breaks the seal, and then she dies in some ice, which means she actually would have been frozen in ice and not dead, but whatever. And like these things that were happening, no, she would have been.
If you get frozen, you're dead.
Okay, but like
preserved doesn't mean alive though.
Yeah,
even turkey, like Walt Disney.
Her heart stopped.
We don't know, but like we can even look at the David O character Keel of, oh hey, I have to do this, bye, in this straight like leaves, and we don't even care about his death at that point. And I'm like, they just was kind of glazing. I felt like the movie was very lazy. I felt like they didn't
the middle
really care
thing was
too much.
weird. I almost completely forgot about that. But when you see it creeping up on him, because like the magnetized thing isn't even really explained at all. It just suddenly that wall becomes magnetized, and he's like, "Guys, do you see this? This is really weird." Like the guy just listened to an ICP song and has no idea how magnets work. He's just gonna like check it out. And then these arms of like metal goo are like reaching out behind him. They look like arms that were going to get him.
And it pulls him back.
That's the thing. It would have made sense if it like impaled him and like hit the magnets, but then it brings him back, which doesn't make sense because then it implies some sort of sentience to the stuff, which is weird and bizarre.
It was more than just the stuff. It was the ship. Like I think Warren, you gave something that I didn't even think about. That like what was special about that spot? Because that spot had Jensen in it, which apparently, affected her in one life, let's say, and then it also brought in Mundy's character. So like what was going on with that spot in particular that was like messing with the crew?
Paradox.
I don't know. I mean, like it's one of the things in which like they could have either showed us or something that we talked about it before. Like they felt like there was something that was after these characters. Whereas they could have just been like kind of like a Final Destination sort of approach, right? Like things were just kind of randomly happening for some sort of higher power or whatever. Like I felt like they could have threw a bunch of scientific terms at us and that would have been more believable than what they actually showed us. So I think that was kind of weird. And if somebody were to basically phase into your ship, why all of a sudden would you believe this person more so than the people that you've been in a crew with for 2 years? why would you even help this? Why would you believe and help this person and not question this person? It felt like the simplest things of common logic that you would follow were just thrown out the window. And again, just like the Alien Covenant movie, these are supposed to be the smartest people on Earth that shows no signs of kind of common sense. It was just kind of tough.
They get a space hitchhiker and they're just like, oh, she knows what she's talking about.
To be fair, I've met plenty of brilliant people that have literally no common sense.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. But then at the same time, right, if that's the case, then be consistent with it. Don't just have one German scientist know all the answers to everything and then explain it to us, and everybody else there was like, okay, I guess we're going to have to get it. I get it. So let's just kind of go with that.
Yeah.
It just felt like kind of lazy, and I felt like they could have easily done a bunch of different things differently that they just kind of chose not to. And the fact that, much like Mocha was talking about, the fact that, you know, the Cloverfield has their name on this, I'm like, JJ literally watched this movie and be like, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's show that.
I would have loved to have seen what the original.
Some things.
I would have loved to have seen what the original script looked like, without like stuff that necessarily called like the whole husband's part must have been scrapped, right? Because that, the whole point of that was like, we'll show a little bit of Earth so we can reference the first two movies. Like, I wonder if the original cut from like 2014 from pre-production was how different that was and how interesting that would have been.
I'm sure it was pretty significantly different. I'm pretty sure it was significantly different because the reason why Paramount got rid of this and gave it to Netflix in the first place was because it went way over budget. It was supposed to be a $5 million film that wound up being more like a $40 and $50 million film. And then they're like, well, fuck it, we're going to put this on ice. And then they gave it to Netflix as a distribution, like getting distribution rights or whatever, so they could finish the movie because they didn't want the financial burden of it. And I wouldn't be surprised if taking the God particle at that point, putting J.J. Abrams as executive producer, and then figuring out a way to slap Cloverfield into it, changed the script in some sort of meaningful way.
Yeah. Yep. I'd be surprised if it didn't. Which is funny because I feel like any like the 20 ideas we've given, if any one of them was the original point of this movie, whether it would have been way better. You know, like or something that we as like some 5 dumbasses hanging out drinking beer on a Tuesday afternoon, night, evening, wherever time zone you're in. Like I wonder if it's like if someone who's a professional scriptwriter could think of something way cooler and it just got totally killed. Because they had such a killer cast. They could have done a lot with this.
I think this is when we're realizing that we all need to get together and make a movie.
Cut to
clothing optional.
The gang makes a movie. Or no, the gang makes a porno.
Yeah. One last thing I would add to this is like I'm a big fan of kaiju movies and giant robots and shit like that, but the size they had of this Cloverfield monster was just there's a level too far, and this crossed the line. When you have a monster that's literally as tall as the atmosphere, it just breaks all like sense of fun or about a kaiju or anything like that.
So yeah, this movie, my criticism with it, it's really frustrating at this point to be a Cloverfield fan. This movie was much more of like a Cloverfield catfish than it was anything else. It was a bait and switch. They brought us in by saying Cloverfield, Cloverfield, Cloverfield over and over again. And the only thing that really tied it into the overarching movies was a really flimsy explanation that, well, the multiverse got fucked up, therefore Cloverfield happened at some point, and the gigantic version of the monster that we saw at the very end that you pointed out, Brylan. But there was like, I mentioned this earlier, and we've all talked about it in one point or another, but there seems to be a legitimate lack of desire to intentionally connect any of the elements of this franchise. And it's the saddest thing about it all. Like nothing made, like so much of this film was just crazy for the sake of being crazy without making any real sense. You know, we already talked about all the different ways the characters died, but really like the ship seemed to be the enemy throughout the movie. The ship locks a girl into that room and fills it with water and then opens up the escape hatch and then magically turns that water into ice somehow. It feels like the ship took the metal foam and actively grabbed Chris O'Dowd and invaded his body with it in order to kill him. It seemed like the ship was doing, like the ship ate his arm. All these things were very clearly the ship doing random shit, but it's never ever touched on, and no one ever gets freaked out by the fact that the ship is being weird. Like everyone's just like, oh, we got to get home. Oh, the ship ate Chris O'Dowd's arm, by the way. Oh man, that's weird. We got to get home. Oh, the ship drowned this girl. Oh, that's weird. We got to get home. And it was just bizarre because you have these elements that are compelling, but there's clearly no reason for them to be happening other than they need ways to kill the characters to give you jump scares. And that's such a waste. It's such a friggin' waste of creative potential. Like all those deaths were cool deaths that could have been that if they were strung together in some sort of narrative structure with a common enemy would have been more meaningful than just what they were at the moment. I feel like there were also, like we've mentioned in a bunch of different ways, there were all these different plot points and character development points that could have been focused on instead of having these characters be really shallow and one-dimensional. Blewett and Abbott actually really focused on this. You know, they wanted to tell multiple stories. It seemed like at some point the script had a lot more going on Earth than we got in the movie. Just pick a story and tell us it. You know, give us that chance to have these narrative elements develop. The fact that there are Cloverfield monsters on Earth is a very compelling story and a very different story than what we have going on in space. So if you're going to show us so many scenes on Earth, like give us reasons to go back to Earth. Like make there be a point. You could have just as easily had Hamilton's husband in the beginning introduced, have the universes switch, and then never focus on Hamilton's husband again at all throughout that entire movie until they switch the universes back, and then have that same final scene where Hamilton's husband is like in the bunker on the phone. He's saying like, and they're saying, "Oh, we found your wife," and he's screaming, "Tell her to turn back! Don't like have them come." It would have been just as scary and just as intense.
Well, that would have been more intense because you wouldn't have seen anything that happened on Earth. So why is someone screaming, "Don't come back"?
Exactly.
And
it
would have also kept engagement in for the next one, because if you think of this as a serialized product, it's like, oh, I want to find out what happened in the interim that everything got that terrible.
Exactly. And it plays into the rest of the Cloverfield franchise. The rest of the Cloverfield franchise is something bad happened for some reason, and now there are monsters here. So we already know that. We know that from Cloverfield 1. We know that from 10 Cloverfield Lane. There are monsters on Earth, and it's shitty. If Cloverfield Paradox is about the events in space that tear open the time continuum in the first place, we don't need to see that guy on Earth see an explosion in the distance and then a quick cut. We don't need to see him walking by in a destroyed building, despite how cool that scene was with the monster walking through the fog. That didn't add anything to the movie because they didn't go anywhere else with that storyline. So remove those scenes in the middle, use that to add extra character development or narrative development on the spaceship. And then end the movie with that intense moment. Because if she had come back to Earth, he screams at on the phone, tell him to turn back when there's these monsters down here, don't bring them back. And then it ends with the giant super mega Cloverfield, whatever, screaming into the sky. I feel like that's a way more intense ending than the one that we got, despite it being the exact same ending, just with less in the middle. There were a lot of really silly things in the movie in general. One thing that I really can't get over, and it drove me crazy the first time I watched it, and when I rewatched it, it made me even more like insane about it, was the fact that we have this ship, right, that is designed for a deep space, or not even deep space, but just a long-term space mission. It has a central hub, clearly. It has a place where the captain sits and he can control most things. And the rest are all these spinning rooms that are there for like people to live on. Yet for some reason, when the explosion happens and they decide that they have to go down and decouple from the ship, two things happen. One, the captain says, we won't get this job done fast enough unless all of us go. So all three go down, even though all they had to do was literally flick one switch. Like three of them jump across this chasm in space, risking their lives just for him to flip a switch.
And then two of them are there to watch him die.
Yeah. And two, this has to go down as one of the worst design choices in the history of design. If you are putting a switch inside a section of the space station that decouples it from the rest, why is that switch inside the section that will be getting decoupled instead of in the captain's quarter where he has all the buttons and controls anyway? Like, it's just insane. It makes no goddamn sense. we're 20 years in the future and design has gotten that bad? No, absolutely not. It was strictly there to have a death scene for the captain, which is fine. If you want to have him go off in a self-sacrificing way, like, I like that about his character. But don't make it so stupid because it devalues the intensity of the scene in the first place.
Well, Warren, I thought you would like
what's up?
The design of the ship, because I kept seeing it when they do like the whole shot of the ship, and I'd be like, wow, that thing looks like it's getting ready to open a really big bottle of wine.
Yeah, I thought it was supposed to, but no. I mean, it was kind of weird because even after the captain died, I felt like there was nobody said anything about it. Like, they didn't even mention it. They just kind of glazed over it and just kind of kept going. And I'm like, aren't you supposed to take a moment to like realize the fact that this guy just sacrificed himself for everybody here at least? But then why wouldn't you send? No, yeah. I got no rationale.
Yeah, it's silly, and it was there just to be there. Similarly to Chris O'Dowd's arm, I was a big fan of just the visual gag of his arm like moving itself across the floor. And for some reason, like trying to give them a message, like that's all like interesting enough. But why is it that Chris O'Dowd's arm that was eaten by the ship has knowledge about the state of their ship from like as if the arm saw what happened in the past? Because the arm gets a pen and writes out, "Oh, open up the dude who just died. Open up his fucking chest."
He didn't have just worms in there. He had a gyroscope too.
Yeah, and it's like, all right, how many things? First of all, how many things are you going to shove up this guy? For one, like goddamn, like pick one. Second of all,
Jack fries.
What happens when Chris O'Dowd's arm gets eaten by the ship? That it comes back in a different part of the ship with knowledge about what happened in the past, despite the fact that the body that it came from had none of that knowledge in the past, present, or future. Like what's going on there? I get it.
I took that as it was an alternate dimension arm. Like, they essentially swapped his arm for the other arm in the other dimension, but that still makes no sense as to why he would know anything about anything.
At best, it's an arm from the future. But
yeah. It was his arm, though. It was his arm because of the bandage, and they guess that was from their own like universe that was chopped off and then moved in the same space.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how. Yeah, I tried to rationalize it. It didn't work.
Yeah, somehow being moved through the space-time of that was the walls of the ship sent it into the future, where it learned that the Russian has the key in his chest, and then got spat back into the ship at the right time so that it could tell them by writing out a note.
Well, I mean,
it's just insane. And you know what? If you have Chris O'Dowd's arm get eaten and then show that arm just kind of crawling through the halls on its own, that's creepy in and of itself. It doesn't need to be anything else. Like, that's just creepy. Why did you have to make it go to that point where it has knowledge and like is also aware? The arm by itself is aware that people are around it who want to know this thing that it's gonna write. Like, I don't know. It was just fucking weird and like weird for the sake of being just like nonsense. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just the scene where they shoot back to it later and it's just kind of tapping its fingers on the table like it's just bored. It's like, who played that arm? That wasn't Chris O'Dowd's arm. That was another like famous person's arm.
It's a stunt arm.
Cast their arm.
It's just George Clooney's arm.
I mean, that scene where it's tapping his fingernails, it's kind of funny. It's a funny enough sight gag in a really silly way, but it wasn't the time for silly in that movie. And you know, like Chris O'Dowd's character was pure comic relief, but also it felt super out of place. I think this movie, if they went all in with it, could have been a comedy, and I think it would have been a better movie if they had just been silly about it. But they didn't. They wanted to make it a serious, scary movie where nothing made sense. And guess what? Like, when it comes to horror, things being unknown is scary. Nothing making any fucking sense is not scary. It's laughable. Yeah. And that's a huge miss on their part.
This is the equivalent of like the IKEA directions of a movie.
Finally, the last thing I want to say, because this absolutely drove me off the wall, is the fact that when they're in Earth 2 or in the space around Earth 2 and everything has gone to shit and all other like everyone's died and it's just what's her name? Hamilton and Daniel Bruhl. She goes, "Oh, well, we just have to get rid of the condensation and then turn the machine off, and it'll fix everything. And then it does. Like, they just go right back. They flick the switch. They get rid of condensation. They're chilling in this film. And it sends them back to their universe, but just like 2 weeks later. So this implies then that there are only 2 universes. Not really a multiverse. It's just a binary universe. What? Like, what? Why? Like, why is it that in this movie, the solution was turning it off and on again? That's nonsense.
Because Chris O'Dowd was in this movie.
Oh my god! It was just so frustrating. Like,
Yeah,
no
if Moss
science
showed up, that'd lose my mind.
That's what I was saying. Is like, what if Hurley showed up on the space station, just like fat and just hanging out?
You had the right idea. I think it was you who said this, or maybe it was Blewett, who said it's like the Prometheus effect when it comes to their scientists. Like, no scientist in the world would have been in that situation and said, "Oh well, if we turn it back on again, it'll just reverse everything that already happened."
No, it's only gonna make it worse.
No, like, yeah, at best. And why didn't the movie make it worse? If it's a multiverse and turning on the Shepard device fucks everything up, they should have came out of that into a much more fucked up situation and have it be like a Twilight Zone-esque like ending where it's, you don't get to see them die, you don't see the resolution, but you know that their life is ruined because they came back and everyone on Earth is like a walking dildo or something like terrifying.
Everything's on top.
Like, nothing else makes sense, so it fits right the fuck in.
I love the line that, like, oh, the condensation was messing with our readings. Bitch, you said that an hour and 40 minutes into this movie?
Yeah, use the windshield wipers.
No way. Come on, man. You gotta give me more than that.
Oh, man. Condensation, man.
Got a little
Condensation
moist in there.
caused the Cloverfield event. All those people in New York died because of condensation. John Goodman got trapped underground because of condensation.
Oh, there was a point where it was established that the German guy was in a relationship with Zhang Ziyi, and she turns to him and she's like, "Hey, can you come over here and check the moisture levels?" And I just looked at Kyle and I was like, "Damn, if my girlfriend came over and asked me to check the moisture levels, I would be on that."
Yeah, there was a weird sexual tension. I don't think they ever said that they were dating, but there was like a weird tension that, like, they could have gone so many places.
Fun fact, all sexual tension between scientists is weird.
Well, why were they talking why were they talking in Mandarin at some points and then talking in English at other points?
Because in 2028, everybody speaks everything.
Yeah.
Fact.
Just
Well,
choose
it's like
one.
the ISS. Everyone speaks multiple languages on the ISS.
Tam speaks Mandarin, so everybody knew Mandarin for her. But when they don't want to bring her into the conversation, they just speak English.
Yeah, but he was speaking English to her, and she was just speaking Mandarin back to him.
She only understood
She's more
English
comfortable
with German
speaking it.
accent.
Oh, English with a German accent. Got it.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I don't know why we're asking any
my
questions
bad.
about this movie, because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
I just feel like
the furniture and it's still upside down.
ultimately, I feel like the fans of Cloverfield, those fans like me who were there in 2008 when we watched those first trailers in theaters that showed absolutely nothing and got us all super fucking excited. The ones who were in the theater and watched as TJ Miller, still fat, ran around with a fucking camera and scared the shit out of all of us about this like apocalyptic event in New York City. I feel like we're owed some intent in what comes next. We're not owed like a good movie, but we're owed intent. Like, try to fucking make this a real franchise. Try to make it a story that has meaning. Because as of right now, I gave it a pass with 10 Cloverfield Lane, where they just barely connected it in at the end. But at this point, it's clearly a trend that they're not interested in telling a Cloverfield story. They're just interested in slapping Cloverfield on as many stories as they can.
Which
Wait until Infinity War. Infinity Cloverfield.
Black Panther.
Thanos' big reveal.
Cloverfield.
So it seems like this movie had a lot of opportunities to be better at what it was doing. Final thoughts for this for Cloverfield Paradox. Andrew Abbott.
I think it would have been a much better movie if it was Cloverfield Paradox. I know I said that before, but I think they're really missing a market there, mostly people's feet. I enjoyed it for what it was, but it was still a steaming bowl of slusho. Go do yourself a favor, watch the first two movies again, and then pretend like this one didn't happen, and wait for Overlord to come out and reserve judgment in 2020 whenever they decide to ship that one out.
Coming out in October.
Mike Blewett.
Yeah, so I don't know. It was a Netflix movie. It was there. I already paid Netflix my, whatever comes out of my monthly pocket, so it's free entertainment at this point.
You just paid for it. It was not free.
Yeah, but I mean, I paid less than the price of one movie to go see infinite amount of entertainment, so I'll give it a pass on that one. Great marketing, and sparks of what could have been. It was like infinitely frustrating just to see like, this would have been a cool movie. This would have been a cool movie. This would have been a cool movie. And I'm only here because they set me up with this crazy cool marketing technique that they did. Disappointing.
I'm just here so I won't get fined.
Yeah.
Warren, final thoughts.
Don't watch this movie. This movie was a waste of time. And honestly, to be completely honest with you, I think this movie is only going to give you more doubt to the future of not only this franchise, if you want to call it, of Cloverfield. It also gives me a bit of doubt of just looking at Netflix original sort of blockbuster movies they're trying to put out. Because the last time that we saw, and I missed the Bright podcast here, but Bright was the last one, and they also didn't seem to really give a shit in that movie either.
Stupid Gesture was the last one.
No. Like big, like blockbuster release that has a sequel. Okay. That's what I'm talking about. Like Funeral and Stupid Gesture, very different, right? But like Bright was hammed up, and that's like this whole thing, and it's already got signed on for a second one. This is part of be on the universe of the Cloverfield, so that's the type of genre that I'm talking about. It's not good, and it feels like they're making these movies for a particular kind of demographic, but they're not really doing their due diligence of making good cinema.
Okay, final thoughts.
This movie was bad. It was a bad movie, but there's a part of me that likes it a lot, and honestly, I'm going to probably watch it a third time tonight. Don't watch this. You should watch this movie. Do not watch this movie expecting to see a good movie. Do not watch this movie expecting to feel good about yourself or the franchise.
Solar Flare.
But maybe watch this movie anyway. Just see. I mean, it's an hour and 40 minutes out of your life on Netflix. It's not like you're watching the extended edition Return of the King. You'll get it over and done with, and you can at least understand why we're all so frustrated.
Just go watch A Funeral and Stupid Gestures. It's much better.
Much better.
And it's shorter.
Yep. My final thoughts would be, I think this movie kind of epitomizes the whole Cloverfield franchise because I think there's a lot of neat concepts, but they're not always executed as well as they should be. I think it's kind of neat that JJ uses this franchise as kind of like a way to have new directors test out their chops given limited budgets and looks like limited screenplays for the most part. Daniel Trachtenberg did a great job with 10 Cloverfield Lane, and this guy has some opportunities. It's a terrible movie. It just wasn't executed well, and I'd say one other thing that was just kind of bad about this movie was the editing of it. I mean, the way they cut this movie together, I think led to a lot of the confusion about what the hell is going on at different parts of the film. And with that, we have been the Down and From Podcast. We're always making more podcasts and other cool things. Mr. Abbott, where can we find more of your work?
Yeah, you can search the Abs Man on the internets, and most of what you'll find is safe for work. The other half is not safe for work, but I'll leave that up to your judgment. Most of my YouTube work is better than the movie that we reviewed tonight, and that's mostly just shitty old music videos that I shot in my basement when I was 10 years old. But yeah, search that on the internet and see what you find. If you find me naked somewhere on the internet, that's your own fault.
Those videos are Roman Polanski approved.
Moko, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter debating whether or not I'd give my alternate universe self a hand job at Mocha Mike LI, as the Lord intended. Unfortunately, you cannot find me at Mocha Mike. The person who has that is actually from a different multiverse and got swept away before you can give me the rights to it. So unfortunately, that's just gone forever. But you can find me there at Mocha Mike LI on Twitter. Also on Instagram, Instagram.com/Mocha Mike, where you can see some of my photography work. And on Medium at medium.com/@Mocha Mike for some long form reviews of the movies that we talk about here.
Awesome. Cool. Mr. Shredder, Mike Blewett. where will we find you?
You know what's happening? You can find me at Mayonnaise Music or Mayonnaise Band on most major platforms. Check us out. We have absolutely nothing new except for an EP that's ambiguously being launched. It's 4 songs, literally, and it's taken us like 9 months. I've been teasing this thing for the past like 7 podcasts we've done, and we are nowhere closer. The artwork's done. It looks beautiful. Thank you, Andrew. It's one of those things that we're just mad lazy. That's it. I don't have a great one for Jesse Rand because there's too many funny things. Like, I was thinking just going the Tom Brady thing with, like, Jesse Rand makes out with, like, his younger self. Like, that's weird. There's the whole, like, makes out with his alternate dimension, but that's too close to Mocha's thing.
Ooh,
Like,
how about Jesse Rand is filled with worms?
And makes out with babies.
And
but it's like, yeah, it's all, like, this movie was too terrible to make a terrible Jesse Rand joke about. There's too much there.
Jesse Rand makes a good Cloverfield movie at gmail.com. I think that's
That works.
Oh.
And I am the Mouth of South Brylan. You can find me trying to pronounce names I should be trying to pronounce on Twitter at Bryland, Brilund. Also, we'll post many movie reviews on Instagram at I am Bryland. And also the host of the Gamescast, twitch.tv/Down From Podcast. Right now I'm on a little bit of a hiatus because I got a little bit limited broadcasting tools out here while I'm living it up on the West Coast in California. But Mocha and Warren, thank you for subbing in. You're still making the Gamescast still fun and entertaining. Can't wait to see more Monster Hunter when you get back, Warren.
Yeah, definitely keep an eye out. We've got Monster Hunter World coming from Warren. We'll eventually have some Final Fantasy Dissidia NT coming from me.
Ooh,
Weeaboo status. Let's go.
awesome.
Excited.
Cool. And Warren, where can we find the rest of our stuff?
For all of our work, definitely the first place I would say is definitely check us out. We have a website, so it's downandfrontpodcast.com. That's where you're going to be finding our Instagram live reactions, our Twitter feeds, our SoundCloud, like literally anything and everything you actually need, especially for our patrons. We just want to say thank you so much. So if you do want to support us, patreon.com/downandfrontpodcast. That's also going to be awesome. And we just wanted to say kind of thank you so much just for kind of hanging in there with us as well. We're going to be doing a bunch of more stuff as we always would be. I know I definitely, when I get back, I have a couple of these Patreon patron only sort of episodes that I'm trying to get recorded. I'm trying to not make them too long, so definitely kind of keep an ear out for that. And also, I wanted to do a small highlight for right now of the SoundCloud. If you want to go and start voting, because I know Thank You for Blue It, he starts making all of our music for this podcast. And although it's a bit of a hot take that Stranger Things is the best theme for our podcast, but some people think Star Wars is good. So why don't you be the judge? Check us out on SoundCloud.
Awesome. Well, we have been in the Down Front Podcast. This has been our review of the Cloverfield Paradox, starring a bunch of actors.
I'm like, no way.
Who was in that movie?
David Oyelowo. I got it. There we go. All right. Cool. Awesome. We will be back again with another movie review shortly. Have a great night.
Later. Don't buy the battery. Hug your kids. Peace.
Bye. Life.